dragonfly. I fly above the trees, over the seas, in all degrees, to anywhere I please. Oh, I want to get away, fly away, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Woo! MicroStrategy True North, episode 14. Here we go. Let's do this thing. Let's have some fun. We have a lot to talk about this week. Oh my gosh, it is pretty crazy and insane how many things happen in 7 days. You know, and we were prepping for this call. I was just thinking through everything that's happened in the last 7 days since our last episode. And there are so many topics we could potentially cover, and it is a little bit mind-numbing. So we are going to just tackle as many as we can within our time frame, and we'll see where the conversation goes. So welcome back, everybody. MicroStrategy True North, episode 14, Have Spacesuit Will Travel. Obviously, the inauguration happened on Monday, and we're going to get into some of those topics. So for those that are new here, what is MicroStrategy True North? MicroStrategy True North is an investment club, a group of people that has gotten together and talked about MicroStrategy. We are doing this in podcast format where we're just sharing the conversation that we would have had behind closed doors, and we're just sharing it amongst everybody else. We try to hit as many topics as we can. A lot of the folks that are on the screen have been in the MicroStrategy trade for a very long time, and we are heavily vested and have an interest in staying at the front of what's going on with this trade, because it's incredibly complicated. There are so many things going on behind the scenes. Political environment, macroeconomics, capital markets, debt, interest rates, so many topics, you name it. So appreciate everybody that's here and everybody that's spending time with us. So without further ado, we'll get into some of the weekly statistics and catalysts and get into the September.
Not financial advice.
Oh, here we go. Soleil, you want to hit him with the not financial advice? That's
yeah.
important.
It's on the sleeve. NFA.
Oh, NFA. There you go. He's got the True North merch. Oh, I guess we might as well hit the merch too. Yeah.
The information may be amazing, but it is not financial advice. Everyone trades their own money.
That's right. It's a sport, right, Ben? What do you say? It's a sport. Individual
investing is an individual sport.
Individual sport. That's right.
Research can be a team sport.
That's right. Research is a team sport. So on that topic, we got Soleil wearing some MicroStrategy True North merch. We do have some merch available on the Hodl shop. All profits from the MicroStrategy True North merch is going to be invested back into the community. We are still figuring out exactly what that looks like. We will have more updates on that probably by the end of February. So more to come on that front. If you feel like supporting, that's a great way to do it. But there are so many other avenues to support so many other things at the moment. So understand. Okay. One of the first topics I did want to hit on is this special meeting. So MicroStrategy had a special meeting on the 21st. That was yesterday, to vote on the increase in share authorization from 330 million shares up to 10 billion shares. There was a couple other items on there as well. But there was just this tweet from Jesse, who's part of our crew as well, who listened to the special meeting and the final tally. So of the folks that voted on the MicroStrategy special meeting, 86% voted in favor for the increase in authorized shares from 330 million up to 10 billion, and 14% of the votes voted against. So I think this is a pretty astonishing number. The fact that 86% of people that voted in this election voted to increase the authorized share count. This, to me, demonstrates that the folks that are voting in this type of election have an understanding of what MicroStrategy is looking to do in the future, with increasing shares via multiple different capital vehicles, investing in Bitcoin and looking to increase the Bitcoin per share yield for all shareholders. So that can happen via convertible debt, ATM equity issuance, preferred stock, which we are unsure of what the terms are yet, and then also to accommodate future stock splits. So it captures a variety of different things. One thing to keep in mind, these authorized share count doesn't mean that we're going to go from 330 million shares up to 10 billion shares in, 2 weeks or 3 months or whatever. 330 million authorized shares. That was the same number of authorized shares when MicroStrategy IPO'd in 1998. So this is really to provide some capacity for MicroStrategy to continue to grow, issue more shares, raise capital, et cetera. If you were to compare this to, let's say, the Mag 7, the Mag 7 stocks all have billions of shares outstanding. I think Apple's got 20 billion shares outstanding. Microsoft's like 10, 15 billion shares outstanding. And that's not even authorized share count. I think their authorized share count is significantly higher than that. So this is not out of the ordinary to have 10 billion shares. Anybody else to add on the special meeting?
No, I was kind of hoping that we would get well into the 90% on the approval side of things, particularly
Vanguard.
Well, yeah.
Vanguard.
It'd actually be really interesting to see a breakdown. I know they'll never give us one, and it's not something they report, but it would be very interesting to see. But 86% is a pretty overwhelming vote for this type of a thing. And, hopefully people realize that this isn't the ominous endeavor that they thought it was going to be, right? It's not an approval for an ATM. It's basically just giving us that flexibility here for future stock splits. So it's really not a big deal. It's raising a cap. It's not a commitment to issue all these shares via ATM. So I'm glad to see 86% voted in favor. I was pretty confident it was going to pass very, very easily, and it appears that was the case. So excellent. Forward we go.
It almost seems like Saylor didn't vote, right? Because he's got 46% of the voting power. And I think 55% voted. Maybe he did. But it's just a little bit interesting. One thing to keep in mind, Vanguard doesn't like Bitcoin. Vanguard owns, I don't know, 3% of MicroStrategy, something like that. But it's through, all of their vehicles on their client's behalf. So, that could be a large portion of it. Who knows? Okay. Next, getting into Catalyst. This is always so small. Here, let's jump in here. Okay. Obviously, we've got completed events. One of them was the inauguration that happened on Monday, and we've seen a slew of executive orders that have been fired out over the last couple of days. I think we'll continue to see a slew of executive orders for the first 100 days of President Trump's presidency. So it'll be interesting to see how the inauguration and the political regime plays out. And I think that will be a majority of this episode. But additional catalysts on the horizon. So we have a Fed meeting on January 29th. So that is next week. We've got FTX estimated $16.5 billion in repayments sent to customers. That's coming up in January, at the end of January. We've got Q4 earnings call, the 10K, and the earnings report. So that'll be on February 9th. I think a lot of eyeballs will be on the MicroStrategy earnings call. Considering that the last earnings call we had was, Michael Jordan worthy, the Q3 earnings call will be taught in finance classes forever. So it'll be interesting to see if they can one up the Q3 earnings call. MSCI quarterly review that happens in February, and the rebalance as well. And then we get into Russell Index Rank Day, MicroStrategy World, and then there's several Bitcoin events that are happening between February through April and May. So just a couple of things to keep on the horizon. As Soleil has mentioned the last couple of weeks, none of these catalysts are necessarily, expect the stock to go one way, but these are all generally long-term catalysts for MicroStrategy looking forward. Cool. Okay. Statistics. I think irresponsibly long MicroStrategy is up at 27,000 members. Now there are multiple groups that are being built and branched off on MicroStrategy. So now there's a MSTY community. There's a high T MSTR community. The Discord is broken out into 12 different channels. I know that the Discord's got 4,500 members in it. There's several internet websites tracking MicroStrategy statistics over time. There is not another equity in the entire market that has this level of kind of dynamicism and community in many different avenues. So it's incredibly compelling to watch, and I think it's worth keeping some eyeballs on. Hold on, somebody just got back here. Oh, there's Dan. Dan disappeared for a minute. Okay. So with that said, I think we can jump into some of the content. And welcome back, Adrian. Welcome back, Ben. I think you guys were, Adrian has been out with like pneumonia for like a month and a half. So, I mean, he's back. We got him. And Ben, you've been out for a while too. You got hit by all of the colds and you have a new microphone. So, hey.
One, I just want to point out that I have turned on 0 additional lights in my basement. So everyone that thought I was just dwelling in darkness, this is how bright it is in my basement. So
did you get a new camera?
I got a new camera. I got a new
Oh.
microphone, mostly because I was sick of moving it around all the time. So just stick it on an arm and, make it easy on myself. But so we're upgrading slightly, but now I got to kill a light or two. So I'm going to have to start unscrewing some light bulbs to get the levels back down to where they need to be here. So we'll get it there.
Nice.
Lots of tweaking to come.
Nice. Adrian, you're surviving. Hanging in there.
I am. I'm still recovering, but yeah, I'm surviving. 2025 is on bullshit, but I will dominate it sooner rather than later.
Right on. Well, glad to have you back, man. Glad to have you back.
Yeah,
Okay. So let's get into this. I think, the inauguration happened on Monday, and I wanted to just throw the topic out there and see what people have been thinking about. I know my brain has been in 10 million places over the last 3 days, just thinking about the inauguration, political impacts, the optics of the inauguration, and just where things may go into the future. And what I'm going to start with, I'm going to start with this image of the inauguration. And we'll just start with that as a topic. I think it was pretty crazy to see that, 5 out of 7 of the Mag 7 CEOs were sitting right behind Donald Trump on the left-hand side for the entire inauguration. I thought that was very symbolic. And then also behind the CEOs was Howard Lutnick. And I think there were a couple other, high-name people. So to me, the optics were incredibly important and incredibly poignant. Business is going to be part of this administration. Focus on stocks, focus on large companies, large corporations. While many people may hate that, I think it's incredibly bullish for stocks and equities. I think these are the most important people to me, and that's why they're sitting right behind me on one of the most important days of my life, right? And I'm just going to start with that. I mean, what do you guys think? What were you thinking as you saw that? It was incredible to see. I'd never seen anything like it before, and I think it was unique. Zuck was distracted. I mean, obviously Bezos's wife was wearing a bra. That was hilarious.
To be fair, I thought you were pulling up the meme when I first saw the picture,
Yeah.
and all I saw was Zuck turned to the side. I thought for sure it was that meme that's been going around, but that was
Jeff
pretty
photoshopped his face horizontal.
funny. That's right.
So it would be a
Right.
family show.
Those
Yeah.
those AI gifs where they're like having everybody like look at Bezos' wife is so
Those
crazy.
are good.
AI is unhinged.
The internet's going to be undefeated forever now, right? I mean, now that memeing is at warp speed using AI, I mean, it's going to be beautiful. There's just going to be no escape now. It's going to be 3 seconds and the memes are going to be flying out there from all these automated accounts. So it's going to be beautiful. But yeah, I mean, to your point, that picture says a lot, having all those types of guys sitting there in the front row, right? One, it probably tells you that they're figuring out that they really are going to need to probably play ball here, right? Because they want Trump to pull down as many regulations as possible, because that's going to massively benefit all the businesses of all the people you saw sitting in that front row. So I'm not surprised that they're playing the game, right? Of course they are. And quite frankly, I think they've all been getting hammered for the last, 4 years here. We didn't exactly have a friendly tech administration in the office recently. So I think they're hoping for some changes there. Obviously, I think most of us are in a show me pattern in terms of what's going to actually come out of here. We saw Ross get out of jail. That was a really big step, at least in indicating that they're listening to what the Bitcoin community has been calling for. So he did follow through on one of those promises. So that was good to see. Still don't have a reserve, but that really shouldn't be all that surprising. I was laughing when people were so confused about why it wasn't in the acceptance speech.
Yeah, like
But
Bitcoin
like the
Reserve
strategic
or
Bitcoin
yeah,
reserve was going to make it into
crypto.
that speech, right? Like it was that high on the list. But I do still think it's coming. I just think that we need to temper timeline expectations. Most, I was a little optimistic that we might see the executive order come through that at least lock down the Bitcoin that we have now.
Yeah.
And maybe we still see that come. I don't know. But I kind of view, the first 100 days as being really important here to see what the direction this administration is going to take. And, regardless of, what you think about this administration or the outgoing administration, right? The one thing that we all know that we're on course for is a massive amount of change very quickly, right? That much became very, very clear. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. It's going to take a while to digest all the movements and all the changes. I saw that they put the freeze on any new regulations being put on business. And so there are going to be some things that open our economy up a little bit, but we're going to have to see what that impact looks like, because we are getting back to one of those points where you're starting to look at the liquidity, the global liquidity that's going to start to pick up here shortly. And you're wondering what they're going to do here to get things under control. So I'll be very curious to see how they act here in the first 90, 100 days.
Yeah, I heard 1,200 executive orders. Right. Okay. So you start to do the math on 1,200 executive orders, and I mean the role of the president's got so many other things to sign.
You almost wonder, does he even know what's in all 1,200?
Yeah, it's
like,
funny.
how are those getting there? Like, does someone just slip one in? Like, I had to laugh when they gave him the World Health Organization.
He's like, what's this one?
He's like, what's this? Like, withdrawing from the World Health Organization. He's like, ooh, that's a biggie, right? And you're like, oh gosh. Like, does he even know what's coming in these, or is there just the shadowy figures that are handing in binders and like, sign this, right? Day one, sign this.
Yeah,
1,200. I mean, that's a lot.
I mean, it's very clear that the team that has been assembled has been working nonstop, very hard, putting all of these things together. I mean, it's important keeping the people, picking the right people around you, right? I mean, what about you, Soleil, Adrian, Grain? Any thoughts? Any things that were?
Yeah, I think that the overall optics of it is positive. I'm still less. It's not that I'm not optimistic about the SBR happening. It's that I kind of just want to see it happen right now. Ross getting freed, that's a huge deal. That shows that Orange Man is at least keeping his word on some of these things. I think that symbolically, that's also huge that he has been released. Seeing all those CEOs in the front row, I think that's a double whammy. I think that could be Trump saying, I am friendly to big business, obviously, right? But that could also be him saying, stay close to me and be my friend, and I won't throw any roadblocks in your way. I think it was a very calculated move to have them there to make sure that the public knows that he is, yes, friendly to business, but also that he wants to be seen as facilitating it. So I think that it's a positive either way. With regards to longer term indications as to what that would mean for the market. A lot of people have been harping on the M2 data, how it's been dropping down, but that often is a lag of about a quarter, if I'm not mistaken. So the real liquidity is not probably going to hit until mid Q1 to the end of Q1, which is why I'm bullish on Q1 overall. And seasonality lines up with that, and the overall flow of the liquidity lines up with that. So I think people just need to be patient now. Everyone was assuming that everything was going to run up. When we saw that run up to 109 on Coinbase, I thought, okay, maybe this might be an actual Trump pump. But as we saw, the second we ran up, we slammed back down. So I think that patience is going to be the virtue here, and that there are a lot of very, very positive tailwinds that will serve us well. SBR, to Ben's point, I didn't think it was going to happen day one. I think it's more like the 100 days thing. Just him going in and throwing it on the table, I don't think would have had the impact that people think. I think the likelihood of blowback would have been far higher. So he's got to play that one a little bit smarter and really coalesce the support around him in those first 100 days, and then he should be able to push it through if he so chooses to push it through. One of the questions I've heard come up is that is Ross getting his Bitcoin back? I think no. Once Uncle Sam has your shit, they're not giving it back. So whether he was pardoned or not, I think that Bitcoin is gone from him anyway. He's not getting that back. It'll be fantastic if he did, but I think that it was Joe. I think I forget who posted it. I retweeted it. They posted a piece of legislation that kind of harkened on this topic. Essentially, the way I understand it is, even though he's pardoned, the assets that were seized, those are forfeit. Period. So whether he was wrongly imprisoned or not, it doesn't matter. Uncle Sam got his money, and he's not getting it back. So any hopes about that should be quashed. I don't think the government is going to sell any more Bitcoin at this point. So we just have tailwinds right now, lots of positive tailwinds. And I think people need to chill and just let it happen. And we'll be fine come end of Q1. We'll do our usual Q2 chop, and then Q3 we'll pop again, and then see what happens in Q4. That's how I think things are going to play out.
Yeah, my first thought when I saw that picture was that just kind of narrows which Mag 7 will buy Bitcoin next. Like Tesla already has some Bitcoin, but it just narrows it down to Facebook, Amazon, or what was the other company?
Google,
In the front row?
Apple,
Google.
And Meta.
Yeah.
Meta.
Yeah, Meta. Probably Meta, since he's got freaking goats named Bitcoin or something, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
probably that my money's on Zuck.
I think we're actually placing too much importance on the Mag 7 buying Bitcoin, though. I almost think it's not going to matter in the long run here, right? Kind of the same way where the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, it certainly accelerates things, but the timing doesn't really matter to the long-term trajectory of Bitcoin. I actually think that there's a much bigger case to be made for smaller market cap companies buying Bitcoin first. And you'd kind of like to see them start buying initially and put the pressure on the larger companies to get in here down the line. I just think that for the Mag 7, making that type of a pivot is almost too big, right, for what they're doing, even if it's a small announcement, right? Just kind of the attention that comes with that. I don't think they view it as something they need for their business yet.
Yeah.
But we've got this just look at the Fortune 500 and how many of those generate zero returns in a year, right? Which is most. You basically have 7 stocks giving returns and then an entire bundle of drag on the entire index. So I think that some of those are much better candidates, but I really think that you're going to see the most activity probably in the sub $5 billion market cap range is where I think we're going to see a lot of that activity happening. And then that adoption will push its way up into the bigger companies with time. But I look at a lot of these companies that are going to be in highly competitive industries, and you realize that once one company, one of your competitors buys Bitcoin, it puts pressure on that entire industry, even if all they want to do is buy it to just normalize the stakes, right? Not allow that to be an advantage for another company. So if one goes out and acquires 500 Bitcoin, you're probably going to have, all the other companies in that industry going, if this is a risk that this company gets to greatly outperform, and then that results in consolidation within our industry and they're going to be the winner, maybe I need to go out and look at buying some of this, if for nothing else but to neutralize that advantage that my competitor has. And I think that that's probably where you're going to start seeing the speed pick up out there in the market. But, it'll take some time to see, but my guess is the next 6 months, we're going to see a lot of those smaller size companies starting to make these announcements. And then a Mag 7 will pop up eventually, and that'll just pour gasoline on it.
And I would add to that. I was talking with Tim the other day, and with Anders, and he was saying that when he talked to the KULR CEO, his orange pill moment was the Q3 earnings call at the end of October this year, or in 2024 with Saylor. So that's how quickly these companies are able to move now with with other companies taking the lead. So again, KULR, the CEO didn't have an orange pill moment until October 30th of 2024. And then whatever it was, 3 months later, they were buying Bitcoin. So to your point, it's kind of an arms race.
Yeah, I actually spoke with the Cooler CEO this week with DR. He said the same thing on our live stream. So I think Ben is right. I think Dan's point is well taken as well. I don't think the Mag 7 really has any reason to adopt a Bitcoin standard at scale right now. AI is the play that a lot of them that they're all going after, and the level of growth we're going to see there, I think, far, whether people want to hear it or not, outstrips what we're going to see in Bitcoin in certain instances. Bitcoin is a far different play than than AI and scaling AI and making the US the leader in AI, right? So I think there's room for both, but I think people have picked their lanes. So you've got Cooler, you've got Similar Scientific, you've got Rumble, you've got all of these companies that are really coming to the fore and making the decision to adopt the Bitcoin treasury strategies. I think that's, to Ben's point and to Dan's point, that's where a lot of them are going to have that real orange pill moment and see to themselves, this is something that we can do that's going to allow us to compete, and others will compete, and it will just be a domino effect from there. I think that we should also prepare for some to jump ship that will find the volatility too much, perhaps in the next 18 months to 36 months. So don't be surprised if you see that. So be prepared. I think that we should be prepared for that. None of the ones that we've seen so far, but I can see one jumping in and then deciding to jump out when things get really hot. So we should be prepared for all eventualities. But Mag 7, I don't know. I think that ship has sailed. But that's just my opinion.
What I would really like to see out of the Mag 7 is not even necessarily them buying the Bitcoin because they want to hold it as a reserve asset. What I want to see them do is buy Bitcoin because they want to integrate it into the AI ecosystem and make
That's
that
exactly
the
what I was
monetary
gonna
network
say.
for AI, which basically would allow external, eventually you're going to have to connect these AIs, right? Because they're all going to kind of be specialized in one field or another. You'll have the general AI, but you'll have the more specialized one where you're going to need connectivity between them, much like we do with APIs on programs today. And what I would like to see is for Bitcoin to fuel that economy, where now these AIs can essentially purchase services from each other when they need different types of information and start fueling that ecosystem. And I think that ends up being just a massive, massive catalyst for Bitcoin. But obviously it'll take time. And right now all these AIs are being built within silos and they're not exactly opening themselves to the outside world for joint development work. But eventually I think that it becomes a much more open system. And when that happens, you need a digital monetary network to be the backbone for that entire ecosystem. And I think Bitcoin has a chance at being that.
Yeah, I mean, Ex Machina and iRobot are all coming together at the same time. But
And Ready Player One.
and Ready Player One. NVIDIA is the largest U.S. stock company as of today. I think that's interesting and an indication that AI is continuing to be at the forefront. It is the most important thing in artificial intelligence is the most important thing in the U.S. stock market today. So something to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised if we see $5 trillion market cap companies in 2025. We got $3.6 trillion company with NVIDIA going up 4% a day. Significant volatility for a large, market cap company. Also, Microsoft up 4% on the day. The significant volatility for a large company. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a $5 trillion company in 2025.
That's very possible, and a reason. One of the main reasons why I'm bullish on AI is because of all the automation that can come from it. I've been sick as shit for the last month. I wrote a series of scripts that have been running my other scripts using AI. So I've been working while I've been hacking up along this whole time in an automated fashion. That kind of automation is soon going to be the base level for everything. Then you have AI agents that can use Bitcoin. This thing can scale in a way that people aren't really conceiving. So I think that 5 trillion is actually low. I think we're going to see a 10 trillion market cap company, 5 trillion in 2025, 10 trillion in 2028 for sure.
It's law of large numbers. I mean, going from 5 to 10 is a 2x. It's not that far. Going from 3 to 10, that's a bit further. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And what was that? Bitcoin on that chart was 2 trillion. So we've got 3, 4, 5 companies that are larger than Bitcoin as an asset. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Bitcoin go to 5 or 10 trillion, or start to start to challenge some of these larger market cap companies. And there's going to be a ton of people that are bewildered and trying to understand the technology and just be confused. And says that it's a non-performing asset, like all of the other bears out there, and are massively misunderstanding the technology that sits behind it. So, oh man, so many things. A lot of people in the comments are talking about Trump and Melania coin. That was another just what the fuck moment of Sunday, right? Leading up to this whole thing. You're just like, what is going on? Dave Portnoy's launching $1 million at Trump coin, hesitated for 5 months to buy Bitcoin, but he's buying Trump coin within like a second,
Is Portnoy trolling, honestly, at this point?
Here's my take on Portnoy. He gets paid by Kraken. He gets paid by Kraken Exchange. So while he says he's taking these bets, his downside's so limited. He's got 3 million people that follow him. I mean, he probably gets paid $100,000 for every bet he takes. So if you take $1 million bet, you get paid $100,000, your downside's 90%. And I think that's the way he looks at it. It's like he's making money no matter what. So
he's also a gambler.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, that
he's
is
a gambler.
That is who he is. So
that's part of the thing.
I could see him just being a total degen on this kind of stuff. Not an informed one, right? Like he's willing to toss money at anything. But yeah, did you like when people were asking Trump about Trump coin? And he's like, yeah, I don't really know very much about it.
It dropped like 25%.
Yeah, it just makes you laugh. Like, we do live in a meme world. We shouldn't be surprised. I don't love to see it, but this is the world we live in. And if people are going to continuously get tricked into these coins, there's very little you can do to help them. But you do hate to see when you've got guys like Trump and that family that are coming back into power. And, at the last minute, you're pulling a meme coin before you get into the office to, beat all the restrictions you've got as soon as you're actually in office. I don't love the aspect of it because the people that are buying those types of coins are the ones that are really trying to hit the get rich quick scheme. And a lot of times that tends to be people that are desperate. And it means that it's a lot of people that can't afford to lose the money that run into those manias thinking this is the ticket. And, we've all seen the show enough times where it was very predictable to see all these major pullbacks happen and all these wipeouts for a lot of people. So, I didn't like it. I don't think it's a good move. I think optically it's very, very poor optics for someone that's going into that position. And, when we were all kind of hoping that after seeing Eric Trump and Saylor and all these pictures together saying they have one mission or one passion, and it's Bitcoin. And then, the next time we see him in a picture, it's, world liberty nonsense or whatever it is that he's pumping out there. And you got Saylor in the picture and he's like, well, I guess he did say Bitcoin in here as well, so, but you just hate to see that coming out of there because that means that they've definitely not been fully orange pilled. They're capitalists to the core. And if they can make $1, they're going to make $1. And unfortunately, we're going to have to take the good with the bad here, I think.
Well, optically, it is truly, truly horrible. Also, the goddamn pastor launched a meme coin too. That at Trump's, I forget at what event it was. There was a pastor that gave a very powerful speech. He also launched a meme coin to make money off of it as well. If there's just going to be a whole bunch of shitcoiners, I think that I don't want to be the bear here, but I'm not going to say this to make things bearish, but it can do more harm than good in terms of perception if we just have a whole bunch of shitcoiners going from coin to coin to coin for the next 3 months, right? So I would really love it if we can just get back to what the real focus is. You make your money on Trump coin, that's great. Can we move on now?
Here's the reality. People aren't quitting their job to work on Trump coin.
No.
They aren't. They aren't quitting their job to work on Solana. They aren't quitting their job to work on Ethereum, right? Like that, Bitcoin is where people are putting their energy. So, Grain, you were gonna say something? Nope, lost him. He's on mute.
I did see people calling for Adrian to launch Quantum Coin, though. So they're still looking for it, Adrian. They want it.
I appreciate the sentiment. I will not be launching Quantum Coin.
Quantum Coin.
One Godzilla candle, 0 rug pull.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. The other thing that was interesting that came up, everybody was talking about the market cap of Trump coin being like 40 billion, right? And they're using like this fully diluted value number. And it's like, look, that there's 20% of that number is circulating supply. And like if all of that supply was on the market right now, I mean, it wouldn't be that number. So, the concept of, market cap is synthetic, which applies to MicroStrategy, which applies to Bitcoin, is a function of everything that's trading at the margin at that time, represented for the entire supply. So, I think that's why narrative is important in a lot of these financial markets. Even Mag7 trade, what's going on with MicroStrategy, or even these meme coins. And we're in this world of fast money, where money can move quickly between these types of coins and these digital infrastructures, and people are going in and out of, Tether, Trump, Solana, into different ecosystems, and trying to chase the buck. Yeah, it's pretty crazy world. Pretty crazy world.
Well, the interoperability is a valid point, and this is something that was pissing me off all weekend. Interoperability is not coming via Trump coin. It's not coming via Melania. It's not coming via any of these other shit coins. So it's not maxi talk to say that a shit coin is a shit coin, right? There's going to be good projects that rise. There's going to be layer twos that are valid. But I think that people are missing the point that a lot of these are clear VC cash grabs, and you're falling for it every single time, thinking you're going to be the one to catch it when it does a 5X. I've seen this since 2012, 2013, going back God knows how long. It's not different. It's just a different chain that's doing it. So if you made money, that's great, but that does not necessarily mean that everyone that gets into it is going to. So people that are hyping this up, you're just creating more exit liquidity. That's all you're doing. So I think people need to be mindful of what they're putting their money into and what they're willing to hype up, because it's just, in the long run, is going to do more harm than good. But I could just be a toxic maxi talking right now, so I don't know.
I mean, I was annoyed, but I went through my shitcoin phase, so it's fine. And to a certain extent, they kind of marketed it as what it is. I think they even said, hey, here's the latest meme coin. And that's kind of the way that I feel about Doge. Like, it's trash, but it was a joke, and they didn't like make it out to be anything that it's not. Whereas Ethereum, they pretend like they're Bitcoin's little brother, and they're going to flip Bitcoin, and they're better than Bitcoin. And that's just straight scam coin. So there's a little bit difference between, they're all shit coins, but I think some of them are at least honest shit coins that aren't scams. And the jury's out. We'll see.
Well, the thing is, where do you think the volume comes from? They announce it, then people with lots of money go in, they push the volume up. Everyone's like, ooh, it's going up. And then they go in, push the price higher, then they sell, and they can make their money and they leave. That's what happens with every single one of these coins. It's a VC pump. They come up with their money, they push the volume up, everyone comes in, pushes the volume up even higher, they sell, and we're left with bag holders. So is that, I don't know if you can ever have an ethical shitcoin.
It's like technical analysis on just isolated steroids.
Yes.
And you have people that are following energy. Like, energy is just moving into these different pockets, and you're just trying to, it's like a leech, right? Like, the energy is moving to go leech money in a different location.
It's the NFT craze all over again.
Yeah.
I mean,
totally.
Most people never really figured out what was going on with NFTs, where these people were just selling these NFTs to themselves via different wallets at ridiculous prices. So it was just pumping up the values on all these NFTs. And then you get a few people. I mean, you got to give them credit for creative points here, but so they would just show like there's huge demand for these NFTs and they can't stop selling on the market. And then they're just waiting for that one rich guy to come in with $1 million wanting to, buy their NFT from them. And then they sell it to somebody else and then they're out. But it took a long time for people to catch on to what was actually happening in those markets that was pumping those prices up. Cause I think so many people were looking at it going, man, like that just really, I can't find where the demand would be coming for all these cartoon pictures. Like I just don't get it. And then you start looking, you're like, oh, they're just selling them to themselves over and over, but it looks like a real legitimate transaction in a marketplace. and then they're just waiting for that one piece of exit liquidity to come in, and out they go, right? So same thing with these meme coins and these VCs that'll come in and trade this coin around, get the volume going, make it look really exciting. The price runs way up, and then all of a sudden, big red candle, right? And then you get to see what retail thinks over time.
And the thing about it is people just go in because they see the number go up, right? And they get suckered. With the NFT craze, when Bored Apes were going for, people were buying them for hundreds of thousands of dollars, man. And like you had celebrities doing it, athletes doing it, and it just made it worse and worse and worse. But no one looked into the technology. NFT isn't best suited for a picture of a monkey. NFT is best suited for unique digital ownership. Something like, a concert ticket, perhaps. Something like a deed for a house. That is the more valid use case for NFT. Your melted acid face monkey token thing wasn't it. And I remember getting like flamed for it back in like 2020, 2021 when I was bringing this up, because people hated it. People said I'm being a toxic maxi. Fast forward, we see that people are still sitting on these Bored Apes waiting for the NFT craze to come back. And it's not going to come back, at least not in that form.
We're going to have to really rebrand NFT, though. They're going to have to come up with another term now, because that term got ruined through this entire
Damage is done.
Yeah. It's over. So they're going to have to do some rebranding before they legitimize it and put,
like a digital ownership token or some other kind of name, because NFT is burned.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there, right? We've got Bitcoin is the best collateral the world has ever seen, right? So it's off on its own, planet. And then you've got all of these other, coins. Some may have some, potential use cases with Sol or XRP or, whatever. That there's energy being put into those for different like use cases, which you may or may not pan out. And then you've got all of this other shit, which is NFTs, meme coins, and all this other stuff, which is really honestly like trading cards, right? Like, but it's just digital. It's just digital internet value that people can hold on to or buy or do whatever with. It's just like, equivalent to, that uncle you have that's got 10,000 baseball cards sitting in his closet. And you're like, what are you going to do with those? And it's like, I don't know. They should be worth something. It's just kind of the same thing. And that market is just going to exist, and there's going to be value in all things. And we're moving towards a fully digital, like monetary ecosystem and digital infrastructure. And that like tokenization of assets and those types of things are going to be around. Like it's just unstoppable. And like whether or not like we like or don't like shitcoins, they're going to be here. They're going to be here forever, right? It's just then who's the next one? And then you're going to have like, shit coins and meme coins are going to be like whoever has the most political power, right? Like we're going to see an Elon coin. We're going to see like a Sailor coin. We're going to see all this other stuff. And it's just going to be, it's like power.
No, you're right. So, but the thing, and this is why tying this all into MicroStrategy and Bitcoin and whatnot, this is why Bitcoin and thus MicroStrategy are unique opportunities. In the case of Bitcoin, Bitcoin is the asset, it's the technology, it's the interface all in one, right? All these other things are trying to Bitcoinify themselves. So with the NFT, you're trying to say it's a digital form of value, but in reality, it's a tokenized version of a physical asset is what the best use case for it is. So in your example of like a comic book or a trading card, having a digital representation of that doesn't quite have the same use case because it doesn't have that unique aspect. It is just trying to represent it digitally. Bitcoin is unique because it is digital, right? So that is why the difference comes in, and that's what makes it so valuable, and that's what makes what MicroStrategy is doing so valuable.
Let me throw one out for you. Taylor Swift concert tickets.
That works.
Digital NFTs. You've got, I don't know, 10,000 of them, and you have to have one to walk in the door. Or something like that. I don't know. This digital infrastructure is going to be around, and people are going to be building on this stuff. And some of it's going to be on Bitcoin. It's just going to like Bitcoin is the gold standard, right? Like it is going to be used for the largest of large assets that need to move hands. Large real estate, large capital transactions, those types of things. But I think we're going to see the crazy shitcoinery like everywhere, infiltrated on all sorts of things. But Anyway,
I tell people in the chat, you leave Jeff's lazy lion alone.
yeah, I know. I know.
The wizard lion is the
That's
one
so
exception
funny.
we'll make in the NFTs. We've been lobbying for Jeff to put a big picture of it behind him on his video feed. So that
My
one gets to
NFT.
stay. That
That
might
one
be
gets
the
to stay.
only good NFT that was ever purchased.
I bought it in the bear market. I was like, what are these things? How do I do this? Somebody asked me what I'm drinking tonight. I've got a little green spot, a little Irish whiskey. It is absolutely delicious. My father-in-law got it for me. Thank you, Joe. Cheers. All right. What else do we have on the horizon here? Doge. Should we talk about Doge? I'm going to share my screen one more time because I think this topic is funny. And first, we're going to start with Ross. Poor guy. Look at this little plant that he was holding on to. Like, man, well,
People were joking that he's got a seed phrase hiding in there.
it is his seed phrase.
Quite literally his seed phrase.
Oh my god. I couldn't imagine living that guy's life for the last 11 years and then hearing what's going on with Bitcoin for while you're in the slammer for creating a website. I mean, I couldn't imagine this
Could you
guy.
imagine sitting there doing the math?
Dude,
how many Bitcoin you had? Oh, it'd be brutal.
I would be in depression. Even set free, I would still be depressed.
This guy is going to be on the podcast circuit like nobody's business. Maybe he won't be. Like he probably needs to relax. Like the guy needs to go drop his cortisol for a couple months. But I mean, him going on the Joe Rogan podcast or like any podcast for that matter is just going to be like the best of the best content for a long time. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. But anyway, that's not what I popped on here for. What I popped on here for is the U.S. debt clock and Doge. So U.S. national debt. So 36 trillion is the U.S. national debt. What is that? That's 12 NVIDIAs, if you think about it that way. And the other number that I think is the most interesting is down here on the bottom right-hand side, U.S. unfunded liabilities. So this includes, Social Security, all of these other things, which is 225 trillion, and that number is growing incredibly rapidly. And the reason I bring this up is because I saw this post from Lynn Alden, which I thought was funny. So Vivek Ramaswamy dropped out of the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, and Lynn Alden says, taps mic, clears throat. Maybe he realized that nothing stops this train. And I think it's so funny to put that in perspective, right? I think the Department of Government Efficiency is going to have a really hard time cutting costs. I think they're going to run into a lot of hurdles. It sounds like the Department of Government Efficiency is going to be around until July of 2026. Like they've basically got a year and a half of runway. But the interesting thing is, this is just an article that came out, is that the Doge targets the penny problem. Why mint money that loses money? So it talks about, the penny, the being around 240 billion pennies are already sitting idle in American homes, about $7 a person. And this should save the negative return manufacturing cost taxpayers $179 million last year alone. And I think it's just a funny data point because there's 330 million people that live in the United States, and that represents 50 cents per person. So if we're talking about a $36 trillion deficit, they got a long way to go. So just a bit difficult, I think. Anybody else have thoughts? Will be interesting.
I mean, if they can put AI to work, that's the only way that I see overcoming government trying to save itself. Having worked in the government, I can tell you that they are not going to go quietly. Like bureaucrats that are basically just practically living off of it's almost charity at this point for this many government employees to just be doing not very much. And they're not going to go willingly. So, but if AI can figure out a way to go around them and just unask these people and replace them with AI or something quick, then maybe it'll work.
Yeah, so that could work. The problem is we have to use government to implement AI. So
Exactly.
shit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
we've all seen the
that-
start of that movie. It never goes well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So
Wait, I gotta learn this thing that gets rid of my job? No.
yeah, exactly. So, no, but even though that comment was tongue in cheek, Soleil's right. I think the only solution at this point is to remove as many humans from the decision-making process as possible in the most responsible way possible. And I don't mean making wholesale decisions, right? I'm talking about streamlining the bureaucracy part of it, the paper signing, the all of that. Yeah, that can work. But I posted something this weekend that said Vivek was leaving, then he wasn't leaving, but now he's leaving again. So clearly these guys aren't on the same page. And I never really thought that having Trump and Elon in the same room was going to go well long term, let alone having Elon be part of Doge and Vivek be part of Doge and whoever else be part of Doge, and giving them as much runway as possible. I still don't see anything happening because you have a bunch of guys that are essentially, I don't care what anyone says at this point, Elon's trying to be a politician. So you have Vivek, who's also a politician, trying to get rid of government jobs and undercut other politicians. I just didn't see how it would work. So, yeah, man, I don't know. Lynn might just have it right on the head. Nothing stops this train. The whole thing's going to be fucked up. So it's a matter of how fucked up do you want it? Do you want to have like a little bit of fucked up, or do you want to have a lot of fucked up? Because there's going to be nothing that changes it without some kind of widespread crisis. Because I am convinced we have a country that's run by a bunch of boomer psychopaths. They're not going to leave voluntarily. We're going to have to drag them out kicking and screaming. I mean, a lot of them are in their 80s, dude. They're not leaving. They're going to stay there till they die. So change is not going to come until some of these people start dying. That's just my opinion.
Dan, do you have thoughts? Somebody wanted to hear what you got. It could be on anything. It could be on Doge, the political sphere.
I don't have thoughts on this.
You don't have to dig.
I haven't lived enough life to weigh it, so I'll listen to you guys for this one.
You're not bullish on boomers dying,
No.
like Adrian?
I'm not bullish on it. I'm just saying it has to happen. My
He's
dad's
just saying
80 years
Thanos
old.
had a point, guys. That's all he's
Yeah.
saying. You know,
Yeah.
just-
I mean, my dad, even my father who's 80 says that, okay, some of these fuckers need to start dying. So if he's saying it and he recognizes it, I don't think I'm that far off.
Yeah, turnover. I mean, think about the digital age, right? Like just people, just general turnover. I mean, folks that are born today, 20 years from now, they're going to have their entire living existence might be what they know of money might be Bitcoin, right? If they have Bitcoin parents, think about all the Bitcoiners that are having kids right now. If they have Bitcoin parents, like their entire existence is going to be Bitcoin money. And like that's what they're going to grow up with, and they're going to work on, and they're going to code, and like every generation has like expanded on everything that they've learned in their childhood, right? Like I when I was a kid, I was playing on computers. When I was in second grade, I was teaching my parents how to use the internet. I was like a second grader, and like that's gonna keep compounding over time. So you're not wrong.
I
My
mean,
son's in college.
if people are in the comments like, "Oh, do you want my parents?" You say you want my parents to die? It's like, no, I'm not. Calm the fuck down. What I'm saying is there needs to be turnover in leadership for there to be change. Just like Jeff said, I'm just less nice about it. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I don't want them to die either. I mean, unless they're a politician, then I'm fine with it.
Okay, see, he was far more specific than me.
Whoa.
But I'm just saying that, look, I don't think it's a good thing that our country had an entrenched leadership of the same rotating domino set of people for the last 4 decades. And there needs to be some. Here's a change we can implement: term limits for everyone. If you were born when people were still using an abacus, I need you to move on. How about that? Like let's have some kind of standard to say that we would maintain operability of government and a change in government and views and opinions and so on and so forth by instituting term limits. And a term limit doesn't mean you do 15 years in Senate, then you roll over for another 15 years in Congress. It means you have a term. Whatever positions you hold in that term, that's it. And it's time for you to move on, do something else, become a public servant of some other kind, what have you. But there needs to be change. And the reason why we have the same thing going on is because, yes, there are a bunch of boomer psychopaths in Washington. I don't know how people don't see it. Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. We need to have a fresh crop come in for this Doge thing to even have a chance of working 10 years from now.
I mean, the generations are changing. My son's in college and he's never written a check. He may never write one.
No, probably not.
You know, our kids are just going to probably just grow up with Bitcoin, and hopefully that'll just be all they know.
We've got a little bit of shit in the comments about talking about politics. Stay in our lanes. Well, honestly, this is just dots. And if you don't like it, you don't have to watch. So that's what I got to say about that. Anyway, let's move on. I did want to talk about this. Every state should have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So on the topic of strategic Bitcoin reserve, the U.S. government, it seems like that might be something that's under consideration, one of the 1,200 executive orders. But there are a lot of states that are exploring, if not approving, a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I think this is incredibly exciting for the future that other states are considering Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. And these states are likely going to be incredibly friendly to Bitcoin related companies. So if you're listening and you're thinking about starting a Bitcoin related corporation or something of that nature, you may want to consider one of these states, because I think they may treat you a bit favorably in the political sphere. So just something to keep into consideration. Anything else? Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. I'm not surprised that there hasn't been an announcement on Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. I would suspect the game theory associated with it would want to keep that under wraps, probably as long as possible. If there was any ability to purchase Bitcoin, which I don't think there necessarily is an ability to purchase Bitcoin without kind of congressional approval. I think that would be something that would be announced. Just thinking about the game theory of it, it would be something that would be announced at a similar time to which it would be discussed in Congress, maybe. So I don't know. Interesting.
If Bitcoin is inevitable, then a strategic reserve seems like it's game theory inevitable, because either the U.S. does it first and then everyone else has to follow suit, or someone like China does it first and then the U.S. has to keep pace with them. So
do you think there's this unspoken rule amongst all the ally nations that basically says, until the U.S. decides to do something, nobody better participate or else? Do you think that there's those types of backroom talks that are happening out there?
Say that one more time.
Where, like, other G7 nations, right? Do you think that there's any backroom discussions from the U.S. going, hey, don't even think about it, right? You guys stay out of Bitcoin, right? We'll think about this as a team, right? Eventually. Do you think that they're having those kinds of discussions out there that's going to prevent other countries from being willing to go in and do strategic reserves or start accumulating because they have to worry about the way the U.S. would react
like
towards
NATO?
them in the event that they did? Right. Yeah, exactly.
Wow, I guess I've never really thought about that.
Because it's a direct undermining of the U.S. dollar, right? So you would think that the U.S. has got to be rather stern with their messaging around that. And if, these ally nations are going to go out and do things that potentially accelerate, the demise or at least the lessening of the significance of the dollar, that they can't really be championing that in back room. So you do wonder how many of those conversations are happening to say, hands off, right? We'll talk about this.
Meanwhile, you have corporations that are literally buying thousands of Bitcoin that are, accelerating this in perpetuity, and you're allowing it and you're kind of leaning into it.
But to me, that's the smart move, right? You're going, look, as a nation, we're not involved in this, but you're definitely allowing and almost incentivizing it within your borders now, which is a good move. Because if I was a nation, I wouldn't be as concerned about being able to get my hands on Bitcoin as long as I knew that there was an abundance of it within individuals and corporations inside my borders where I could just incentivize them to give it over to me over time, and I'll build a strategic reserve that way, right? I'm not rushing to exchanges to go market order, $1 trillion of Bitcoin. I'm going to use, tax structures and discounts and incentives to get the corporations within my borders to hand it over willingly in return for some financial benefit to them in terms of an incentive or a reduction in taxes, something of that nature. So you're going to effectively solidify your position by welcoming that type of innovation within your own borders and just not discouraging the use of it. And then if you do that, you buy yourself enough time where you can think about how you're going to execute on this later to make sure that you get it as a national strategic asset versus just being held with your companies as a corporate asset. So you can give them a 20% reduction in taxes if they pay it in Bitcoin or whatever you want to do to get them to fork it over, right? People will follow incentive structures. And so if they wanted to accumulate, that's probably a much more friendly way to do it than going out and just competing to see who can market buy more Bitcoin on an exchange. I'd like to see the exchange side. I think that'd be far more fun for us, but I don't see that being how it works, right? But we'll see. I don't know, obviously.
Wow. I mean, if I were another country and the US came to me and said, don't buy Bitcoin, it will undermine our currency, I would turn around and go buy Bitcoin. Right?
I don't think they're going to, say it in those words, right? I don't think they're going to admit to that, but they're just basically going to say, hey, if you want penalties and you want tariffs on your country and you want to, get locked out of transacting with the United States for trade, and we're the largest consumers, then, don't play silly games. But I would agree. I would have the same reaction. You're going, wait, maybe this is, it's like them telling you what books you're not allowed to read. You're like, I kind of want to read that one now, though. So maybe they just go totally quiet on it. That could entirely be the case.
I mean, it's so tricky. I think it's so tricky. It's like the world's biggest problem. the Bitcoin game theory problem is the world's biggest problem. Huh.
Well, no, we got bigger problems. They're just trying to avoid the solution because the solution stops the games, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What is the solution? You just eviscerate the entire government? Like,
I don't think they're super open to that.
No. Or like the military. What's the military make up? Like 60% of the budget or something like that? It's something absurd. I could be way off, but
Someone posted it. It was like Medicare, Medicaid, and military is 80% of government spending.
Right. Those aren't going away. So, all right, you got 20. It's a classic 80-20. But it's not a classic 80-20. It's the opposite. It's like three things making up 80%. Anyway. Yeah. Wow.
The 20% of the people at the company do all the work. Was that the rule?
Yeah. It's like where you can get rid of 20% and 80% still work. But it's like you've only got 20% to potentially cut, and it's like even if you cut 10%,
80% is inefficient, but you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
The problem is they need the economy to grow alongside any of the cost-cutting initiatives, right? For this to really work. I mean, finding big enough buckets that they're going to be able to cut out of for Doge, depending on what type of leniency they give Elon to go in and swing a sword, right? Because if there's a guy that's going to go radical on trying to trim out of a government, it's Elon, right? I mean, look what he did at Twitter. But you've also got to know that when you bring a guy like that inside, you might need to put a few checks in place there, which he's not going to like either, right? He's not used to asking permission for things. It's why he's so effective, is he can just go in and do it himself. So depending on what type of leniency they give him, but the benefit of having him on the inside is he's probably got some rather good insights in terms of what would actually start stimulating economic growth again, because that's where we've kind of stagnated for a while. And I think that that's going to be just as important to this equation as cutting the costs, right? Cutting our spending. You got to hit both sides of this to really make this work. But, sometimes you got to grow your way out of a problem, but we know what they tend to do to grow out of a problem. So, they're kind of stuck at the moment.
Yeah. You have to incentivize innovation And I mean, that's probably another reason why 7 or 5 of the 7 Mag 7 CEOs were sitting right behind Trump at the inauguration. I mean, it's just totally
And
crazy,
inject
unprecedented.
liquidity, right?
You know what? You know what was
Incentivize spending.
also. You know what was also pretty insane about the whole inauguration thing. After the inauguration, Trump went to an arena with a pile of executive orders, signing executive orders in front of a crowd at an arena. Right? Like that is just total showmanship, and it's like turning this politics into this, into a show. And now it almost any future politician like basically has to do that, right? Like now that somebody's done that, it's like, okay, now that's what people are going to demand that you do, is that, if somebody's coming in day one, like you're going to come in and get in front of a crowd and sign a bunch of executive orders about what you're going to do. And it's just so.
We're definitely the world's biggest reality television show, right? Like instead of the Truman Show, we've got the Trump Show, and this has got to be. It's part of the problem is we all love to be entertained, right? Even sometimes if it's to our own detriment, we love a show.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we've been signing up for a while now. And we're going to get one. There's no doubt about that. So get ready to be entertained. It might not be in the way you like, but you're going to be entertained.
Yeah. I mean, I will say everybody looked sharp as shit. Like the whole Trump family looked sharp. Like they're all dressed to the nines. Everybody was incredibly sharp. Yeah, the whole thing was just such a spectacle. And it was an all-day thing on a holiday. And it's like I had nothing else to do except, and everybody's like, are we going to get free Ross on day one? It's like, well, what is day one? Right? Like he signed in at noon and went and had lunch and did this like crowd thing at 7 p.m. or whatever. It's like there's only so many hours in a day, right? Like what is day one? Is that day zero, or is the next day one? Man, it was just everything was everybody was so focused on it and just like refreshing feeds and just chat. There's so much noise. It's so chaotic. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, a lot more chaos.
So let's shift out of politics, and we need to get back to MicroStrategy.
Yeah, let's get into it. I mean, we're an hour 10 in.
So the big question, do you think we're in a blackout period now? We're exactly 2 weeks from earnings. They announced earnings are on the 5th of February, which means that we are now in the 2-week window. So do you guys expect that we're going to see more ATM Bitcoin purchases here coming up? Or do you think it's going to slow down and we're not going to see any ATM usage here?
Ooh.
So you asked that question like you kind of have an answer already. Ben.
Oh, I don't have an answer. No. I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to tell us a lot because we've never really been watching the blackout periods the same way we are now.
No.
It just never, until they had these ATMs available at this scale, no one really cared, right? It wasn't really a consideration. But now that everyone's become really sensitive to ATM usage because we've seen, tens of billions of dollars of it in a pretty short time period, this is going to be the first time where we're really going to get to observe how they behave during a 2-week period. Clearly, it's not a 3 or 4 week blackout period, right? Because they used it. So now we find out, is 2 weeks their standard where they're going to lock out any of the ATM usage, or do they have a structured selling agreement that allows them to continue doing it? That's what I'm really interested to see here, is whether or not they actually do continue to use the ATM during this blackout period, or if it's a true shutdown for them, which might mean no preferred, no convertibles either. So, we might have 2 weeks here where we're just kind of sitting on our hands waiting for something to happen. But once they're through that, then I think you're going to have everything happen all at once. I think it's going to go really, really fast.
Do they spend their money on their Bitcoin immediately? Or do they, could they have possibly stashed some cash and they could still be making Bitcoin purchases over the next 2 weeks, even though they're not selling ATM?
They're usually using it immediately. Yeah.
Immediately.
Because they report on what they've got left available on the ATM every time they do an 8K. So you can see what they bought, how much they drew down on the ATM. So you can start to you can start to see them using it. But he doesn't tend to wait. He seems like a waiting to buy Bitcoin is always a bad plan type of guy. So I don't think he tends to sit on cash at all.
And the blackout period, just to clarify for anyone who's like new to the idea, isn't a legal. It's not they're not legally obligated to honor the blackout period. It's just management does it, I think, to cover their sort of liability going into an announcement, into an earnings report, if I'm correct.
There's some verbiage in an 8K or the initial filing of the ATM about material non-public information blackout period. But that's it. It's very gray. It doesn't have a specified time limit. It's very simple.
Yeah, it is company specific. It was originally meant to stop insider trading during those periods. So they didn't want to allow any executives to be selling stock before any new information would come out. And so for most public companies, a minimum of a 2-week is kind of the standard. A lot adopt a much more, conservative approach, and they'll stick with 4 as kind of their standard blackout period. But it also expanded out because, technically ATM selling is inorganic selling pressure into the market, right? Because it's coming directly from the company. And so most have expanded those rules out to say the ATM would also apply during this period. Insiders won't be selling shares and the company won't be selling shares while we're waiting for earnings to come out. So it would be pretty standard, but that's the beauty of MicroStrategy is we're now kind of watching them under a microscope here to see exactly how they execute. And within the next 2 weeks, we'll probably have our answer on that one. So
yeah, I mean, what we saw like 11 weeks in a row with the Bitcoin buy announced on Sunday and I guess announced on Monday that they purchased Bitcoin, which is incredibly cool to see because you have a company, right? MicroStrategy is the only company in the QQQ where you have an understanding of what the company's net income will be daily, 24/7, 365. So it should smooth earnings volatility and kind of volatility in equities that purchase Bitcoin, and they do these announcements, weekly like this. And it's pretty fascinating. So one thing I did want to add and touch on because we're on this topic. What I think they still buy, Ben, to your question, I think they still buy Bitcoin this week. I think it's automated, plugged in, and it's going to be, we'll get another announcement on Sunday, another announcement of a Bitcoin buy on Monday. And it's just kind of like, we're going to run that ATM dry kind of thing. This is the updated leverage statistics. So as of 121, so yesterday, purchased 461,000 Bitcoin. Bitcoin price as of today, it's at 102,000. Let's just put 102,200. And so the Bitcoin assets, 47 billion, total liabilities, 7.5 billion, brings it to a liability to asset ratio of 16%. So the balance sheet is continuing to strengthen and improve and get healthier. And the one calculation I did here, just to, provide some perspective, back at the end of September, so the end of Q3, the leverage ratio was around 30%. So they had 15 billion in assets on $4.5 billion of debt. If we were to go back up to a 30% leverage ratio, that would be $14 billion at today's Bitcoin price. That would be $14 billion of debt. So that means they have capacity to add $6.5 billion of debt. And at today's Bitcoin price, that's another 63,000 Bitcoin that would be added to balance sheet if they, went out to market for $6.5 billion of debt. So there's some capacity here, right? We can see this continue to grow pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think the preferred's going to come out before we see any convertibles showing up. I think that really what they're trying to do is get all the activities out of the way that lower that leverage ratio. And then I think you're going to see them lever up very quickly after that. So the preferred offering, because it's a public offering, there's a lot more administration that goes into that type of an offering. So it takes a lot longer for them than doing a convertible offering does, where it's a private placement direct with people that they already have identified. So the preferred coming, that's $2 billion that moves over to the fair market value of their Bitcoin, which just creates additional capacity there. And I think that they're very quickly after that preferred gets out there, I think they want to do $2-3 billion convertible offerings. Probably one week, one the next week, right? I think they'll at least spread out that initial hedging period, so it's not all getting hit at once. But I think then you'll see $6 billion come out really quick, and they want to get that out in Q1. It's pretty important for them from a strategy and a timeline perspective to get as much of the fixed income out the door in Q1 as they possibly can. So a little help from Bitcoin. And I think we see, another 2 to 3 billion get out the door in Q1. And the reason being that for the early conversion of the convertible bonds, there's usually a 1-quarter lag before that provision becomes effective. So if they issue all these bonds in Q1, that means Q2, the early conversion, that 130% trigger, that's not going to apply, right? But it will apply in Q3. And so if you follow the Bitcoin cycles, and everyone's kind of looking at the end of Q3 as being that blow off top, right? Somewhere relative in that time frame. That means that there's a real scenario where coming into Q4, MicroStrategy could almost completely de-lever going into what could be a bear market. It provides them the ultimate inflexibility here if they are able to trigger those clauses and get that debt off the book. So just the fact that that's a possibility, I think, forces them to speed things up in Q1 on the fixed income side and try to get as much of it on the books as possible so that those clauses are effective going into the second half of the year. And that way it buys them a little wiggle room where they could, wait for a couple months or 1 month, 2 months, see what seems to be happening in the market in terms of whether a bear market's going to materialize or not. And then they can capitalize on that because they would have all kinds of leverage capacity available to them to go build out a new debt ladder into the future. So that's why I'm expecting pretty heavy activity Q1, more so than I'm expecting in any other quarter this year. I think this is going to be a really big quarter for them trying to get these things on the books. I'm also expecting that you're going to see several of these bonds roll off in Q1. I think the 27s are a given, whether MicroStrategy has to force it or not. That's going to be the question, right? Because they can force that one. They can't force the 2028s or the 2030s, but at this point, those are trading so close to equity already that I think that those will be incentive to roll off as long as they can get an allocation into the next ones that they're putting out, which I'm sure they would. So that frees up another, the 2027's $1.05 billion, the 2028's $1.01 billion, and the 2030's $800 million. So there's another, close to $3 billion in capacity right there that they would have available. So that's what I'm looking at. And that's why I'm kind of anticipating that they got all the ATM out of the way. That created a lot of leverage space. You do the preferred as long as they structure that as equity, that basically acts like the ATM, and it creates more leverage because it doesn't put any liabilities on the balance sheet. It goes straight to the equity section. So now you've got $2 billion more of unencumbered Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And then now you've got a couple months here where with any help from Bitcoin, you're going to have maximum flexibility to get several of these out, start rebuilding that debt ladder in $3 billion tranches. And then you've got time to work for you here this year. If we do get this, raging bull cycle going into the second half of the year, you've got a real chance at being able to clear all that debt really early in the cycle, which provides you flexibility depending on what the market conditions throw your way. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And that's how I'd approach it from a strategy perspective if I was in that room. And I'm sure those guys have considered that plenty of times.
Foot on the gas. And then foot on the gas.
That was really well worded.
Yeah.
Really well said then.
Foot on the gas, but have capacity to delever going into a bear market, which would allow MicroStrategy to be in strength in a bear market, which has never happened before. No company's been in that position before. It's a complete opposite of FTX collapse. It's, that would be a very unique scenario.
What's the max here though? So So right now, your sheet said, Jeff, they have about $6 billion to lever up to their 25 to 30% ratio, just based on the current Bitcoin price and current outstanding debt, right? So if they get $2 billion cleared off their balance sheet with the 27s and 2029s, then that frees up what, another billion and a half, 2 billion. So, and then if the price of Bitcoin's up another 50%, like let's say they could add 10 billion. Let's say midway through Q5 or Q1, they could add they could add 10 billion to hit that 25% or 30% leverage ratio. There's no. Do you think they'd be able to go out and sell 3 back-to-back converts like in Q1?
Oh yeah.
I guess I don't see any reason why not, but that would be incredible, right? Like that would be the juice we are looking for.
Yep. Yeah.
Great
I don't think
result.
they would have any issue getting those out the door. None at all.
All right, let's just say $110,000 Bitcoin price, and let's just say they rolled off $3 billion of debt minus 3,000. Yeah, boom, you can raise $10 billion of debt to get you to that 30% figure, which would buy $100,000 Bitcoin.
So yeah, 3 billions. That would be killer.
Yeah.
And
So I'm
we've got
showing
deep
you
backup.
move it to 110,000 if you assume the Bitcoin price at 110,000, and you add 2 billion. Yeah, you could easily get over, because you got to remember that the preferred also counts in the fixed income side of this equation, right? So when you're looking at that 18 billion they've got left on that side of the 21-21 plan, that includes the 2 billion that they're counting that as fixed income. So, you've got 2 billion that'll get out the door rather quickly. So you're looking for space for 8 more. And easily, if you do that issuance, you clear the 27, 28s, 2030s, you've immediately got space for just under 9 billion right there. So it wouldn't shock me to see it be more than 10 billion, but 10 billion is kind of my target that I'm looking at for this quarter in terms of what I think they can realistically probably achieve, but they can probably go a little bit higher with some help from Bitcoin. But we'll see what
That
happens.
would be insanity. And Jeff, you said that at 110K Bitcoin, it's like 100,000 Bitcoins.
Yeah, raising 10 billion at 110,000 Bitcoin would buy 100,000 Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like doing the ATM ahead of schedule was the perfect execution.
It's perfect because as the convertibles come in the door, you're going to pump up, like as that convertible debt buys Bitcoin, you're going to pump up the Bitcoin price, which also manages your leverage at the same time. So you have like both of those metrics that are moving for you at the same time. So like slamming the ATM first makes all of the sense in the world because it's managing your leverage ratio as you buy the convertible debt, and it pushes the price of Bitcoin higher because we know it does, right? Like we know that if they're going to buy $10 billion of Bitcoin in Q1, like the price of Bitcoin is going up, which should improve the overall leverage ratio. Now, the real question is there additional demand behind Saylor when that happens? That's the real question.
Yep.
And who is the demand? Is it other corporations? Is it nation states? Is it this game theory situation? Like, who is the demand and what does it come for? Because if there's no demand behind it, like let's just say Saylor buys $10 billion of Bitcoin, price goes to 150K, and there's no demand behind it, it might drop back to 110K. And that's the speculation that I think a lot of people are doing right now is like, who's buying this? Why are they buying it? How much are they buying? How long are they holding it? Is it permanent capital? Is it part of their strategic play in perpetuity? Do they understand the tech? Are they going to use the tech? How is utility improving? I mean, there's so many facets to the whole equation.
Yeah, people, it's the beauty of MicroStrategy is that there's such wild disagreements about the value of it. Like you got to realize that is what's generating the volatility here, right? It's the same thing with Bitcoin. It's that disagreement on price that allows for the wild price fluctuations to even happen. And the wider that disagreement is, the bigger those fluctuations are going to get in the price. And so the fact that we're looking at this and you've got, this big group of people out there that thinks that MicroStrategy should be valued at just the net asset value of their Bitcoin.
God.
And then you've got other people that think, that this should be, 30 times,
Hold on. Bitcoin is a non-performing asset. That was one argument I got. Bitcoin is a non-performing asset. I'm like, you are crazy because
well, it
Let me show
non-performed
you the
from $1.5 billion
performance.
to
Yeah,
90
it's like-
billion.
have you been asleep? Oh my God. For the last decade? Wow.
Well,
It's crazy.
MicroStrategy's got to be laughing because it's non-performed its way all the way from $1.5 billion market cap to 90 billion. So,
Yeah.
I'll take that type of dead weight all day long. But it's that disagreement that is what's driving a lot of this price movement, right? Because you've also got the other set of traders that are out there who are looking at it. And even if they're bulls, they still all have a point where they go, well, maybe it's getting a little oversold now, right? And so when you tip that balance at these blow off tops and they go, no, this is too much, right? I believe it's fine at a 3 MNAV and a 3.5, but as soon as it's getting above that, I think that, it's got to shift. Then you get way more weight pushing it the other direction and you get that gamma effect going down and it starts driving the volatility the other way until they change their mind again, right? And so the wider that range is, the more volatility you're going to get in that asset. It's the same reason that Bitcoin fluctuates so much and it's a 64 vol asset, right? It's because nobody can agree on what the value of Bitcoin should be. So it's one of the great things. I almost don't want to try to stop people from really being bearish on MicroStrategy share price because you want those two very different opinions in the market
The
because
volatility
it helps
smile.
you create, it helps you create this beautiful trading asset. And I don't want that to go away. So if everyone starts agreeing, then it starts changing the volatility profile of something. The good news is I don't think we're anywhere close to that. If my feed's any indication, we're nowhere close to people agreeing on what the value of Bitcoin is or what the value of MicroStrategy is, right? You've got all these people out there right now saying Bitcoin should be $1 million a coin, and you've got the other camp saying it's going to zero. And the beauty of that is we don't need to agree, but man, is it going to make that thing move? And that's given life to everything we like to trade. So
Yeah.
I love it. I don't want it to change.
And some information asymmetry is it's so true. I mean, there's so much information asymmetry in this whole thing, and Saylor is making the stock chaotic by design for everybody, which is nuts. Which bringing up volatility for Soleil and Ben, a lot of people have been asking about MSTY. Ben, you had some insights on MSTY last week, selling volatility, covered calls. What'd you find out? That's worth sharing that you can share. I know there's probably some.
Yeah, some of it I'm not going to get into yet tonight because I still want to go through it. But really, what you're looking at is the way that they're doing the distributions, right? People are taking distribution as the same thing as returns, and those two things are not necessarily the same. So there's some mechanics in terms of the way capital gets returned from MSTY that's a little different and a little misleading in terms of what people think the actual performance of MSTY is on a monthly basis. So I've got some more digging that I'm going to do into that, and I'll get together a post, and then we can go in and do a deep dive on that. But I don't want to shoot from the hip here on a live call. We'll do that another time.
There's a lot of people that are looking into it, and maybe it makes sense to try to bring somebody from YieldMax on to talk about what's going on and the mechanics behind the thing. Because I mean, it's you can't ignore it, right? I mean, some of the posts that I've seen recently, it was like, I mean, there's a MSTY community, and one of the posts was, why am I not quitting my job, parking all of my money in MSTY and just living off the dividend? And I think a lot of people are considering that right now because it's not a lot. It doesn't take a lot, right? This isn't a 4% dividend yield ETF. This is, I mean, they returned what, 130%, 120, 130% yield.
Yeah. Somebody tagged me in a post. They're like, hey, what do you think about this? And the guy had done, he even figured in paying taxes, and it was a fairly reasonable return. And he basically calculated that even after paying your taxes, hypothetically, you could put 15 grand into MSTY, and then in 4 years be earning 15,000 a month in dividends,
Right.
without putting anything extra into it.
Right.
And it looked like the math checked out. But a lot of people have been asking about it lately, and so I'm actually going to do a challenge in my account I'm going to turn my entire IRA into MSTY, and then for the next like 9 to 12 months, I'm going to put an equal amount of money in another account, and I'm going to try to out trade them and see if I can grow my account bigger than their MSTY account. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because again, it's like there's different risk metrics that you're probably putting into play. Like it depends on how many shares you're trading against. You may want to hold on to your shares longer than like the synthetic long that YieldMax is creating. Like they're not actually holding shares. So yeah, it's the whole thing is very, very interesting. It's very appealing, very intriguing. And we're going to see a dozen of these things. Misty isn't the last.
Yeah,
Well,
and I'm
these
not
other
gonna-
issuers can't ignore it anymore, right? Because it's
Yeah.
become such a popular product that that's what's going to cause a lot of the research to go into the actual structure behind Misty, is that you're going to see everyone else trying to recreate, the same way Soleil is going to try to do, where you try to recreate those types of returns, but you've got to try to figure out the right structure for the fund where you're either relying on the communication of the distributions that people are taking as yield, or you've got to balance that with what can you actually generate and how many of these get into the market before you've got all these public positions disclosed and it starts really creating some games in the trading market, or at least in the options market, right? Because these
Well,
are public positions. You can see what they're in every single day.
That's exactly it. It is moving the market. And as more capital goes into these types of trades, that will, and I'm curious to get Josh Mandel's view on this, because that heavy volume of like at the money, near the money, credit spreads, calls and puts impacts how the stock trades. And I'm curious to see if Josh like factors that in his calculus on, or if knowing that exists and how they structure their trades impacts how he sees the market. I think that would be really interesting. And
Yeah,
someone mentioned.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, someone mentioned in the comments they wanted us to talk about Josh Mann's new covered call position. So for anyone unfamiliar,
I'm not going to talk about Josh's position. Josh needs to talk about this.
What kind of bear is he right now? I don't know. He's got money in the game, right? I haven't seen his position.
Yeah, he put a bunch of short calls on at February's 400s, 425s.
He's a gummy bear.
But they're covered. He's raising capital for exercising. It's similar to what he did a month ago, and he sniped it. So we'll see.
Yeah, Josh has long had a thesis that kind of the bottoming out for Bitcoin comes around March, right? So it's not at all surprising, and Josh is a far better trader than I am, so I don't really question his methods. I'm just not going to chase him in and out of trades all the time, because the thing you need to realize when you see his trades out there is because he's such a more intelligent options trader, because he did it for a living for years and years and years with short dated options, and he's running all these desks, is he'll see something in the market that'll change his position immediately, and he'll just rebalance, and that's just a part of his everyday normal trading life. And he's really, really good at it. And it doesn't mean that he's going to immediately tell you that he's changed his position, right? So you've just got to, if you're going to chase, and this isn't just for following Josh's trades, right? Because Josh is brilliant, but anybody's trades that you see out there, the first thing that you need to realize is if they change their mind on that thesis, you're not going to be the first one to hear about it, and they're going to move long before you ever figure it out. So I tend to stay far away from copy trading. I'm always rooting for Josh to make a ton of money, because it's a lot of fun to watch him do it, because that he's sharp. But I don't chase him in and out of these positions. I got to stick to what my strengths are. I can't try to piggyback on someone else's.
Yeah, I mean, what's he got, like 54,000 MSTR, and he's aiming for 100?
Yeah, I bet he'll get there. I bet he will get there. I mean, if this year is nearly as wild as we think it's going to be, you're going to see him swing in both directions here, right? He'll be short and he'll be long. And I think he's got a real shot at getting to that 100,000 shares in that account by the end of the year. So I'm rooting for him.
Josh Mandel's just a billionaire.
Yeah.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Yeah,
he
and I'm
might
not
be
gonna
now.
copy-
Who knows? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think
We'll
it's
never
getting
know.
Close.
He's like,
Yeah, and I'm not copy trading MSTY. Like I'm gonna do my retail thing and try to beat them with what I do, which is kind of you have to take the advantages that you have. Like they have to mechanically follow certain, probably algorithms or whatever. And as a retail individual, I can just do whatever I want. I can just have all shares if I want. I don't have to do synthetics. I can do poor man's covered calls. I can do, I can purchase long calls with the proceeds, and take some risks that they probably are not allowed to take.
see, but you're going to do it like a man. You're not going to outsource your mercenary work for selling covered calls. You're going to do it yourself. And if you lose,
Exactly.
you're going down swinging, man. You're
High
going to have
Oh,
that
yeah.
sword in your hand.
It did make me nervous. I was like, oh man, after all this trash talk, like if I can't outperform them, I just had to delete.
You just
know,
lose all your shares the very first
Yeah.
week, and you're just out of the
I
game.
just delete all 300 videos and just write my entire existence off the internet.
Yep. You're a U.S. Treasury maxi at that point.
Yeah.
I think one thing that folks need to keep in mind on that Misty trade is that the distributions are taxed as income. So tax has really got to be a huge factor of how you're viewing the trade. I myself have some in my HSA, which has proved to be really nice so far. But it's just one function of my entire portfolio there. So it's but in that instance, it's double tax advantaged, where the distribution can be used to pay massages or doctor visits or dentists or whatever. So for me, it works really well there. But there might be better products that come out in the future. So always keep in mind.
Well, when you're
Mind
replacing
open.
your sauna every quarter, just remember to pass the old ones down to the rest of us.
The sauna. Does anybody need a sauna? It must pick up. Yeah, no, that's. I am excited about my future sauna. That should be really nice. What else? What else is there? Oh my God, there's so much.
We didn't touch half of it.
Let's like SEC. I've got this Josh Mandel definition of an equity, which I mean, we brought up Josh. Let's talk about that because that's kind of cool.
I love that.
Yeah,
definition.
it blew your mind last week.
I love it. I've been thinking about it all week.
I mean, when you think about it like this, it does change your perspective. And Josh has done this really good job of changing my perspective on many things this year. And this definition, I think, is a really good one. So an equity security is not direct ownership of the assets of the company. It's a call option on the assets of the corporation with the strike price equal to the market value of all the company's debt. Options derive value from the volatility of the asset. Therefore, the greater the potential volatility of the underlying asset, the greater potential value of the equity security. It's a great definition. An equity, like holding the stock, holding the equity, is an indefinite call option without an expiration. Which I think that was what he said that Dan, that kind of like blew your head. I mean, how has that changed your perspective?
It makes you rethink the MSTR thesis. I think for someone who doesn't understand what an equity actually is and why, and they have a tough time figuring out why MSTR may be potentially valuable and continue to be more valuable in the future, then understanding an equity as a call option on the assets of the company rephrases your understanding or reshapes your understanding and makes you kind of more critical as to, okay, what is the value? I didn't say that well, but that was kind of the idea for me. It's like, okay, you don't actually own the company. And I think that's what people initially think when they think owning a stock.
It's a call option on the assets of the corporation. And and effectively kind of the leverage too.
Sounds like you want a corporation with really strong assets, huh?
Yeah. You want a corporation with
exactly.
strong assets, and the strike price is equal to the market value of the company's debt. Right. Okay. So let's think about this in reference to MicroStrategy. Over here, my enormous spreadsheet.
You'd also want a company who's increasing their assets at a rate of 100% annually.
So it's a call option on the value of the assets, and the strike price is the value of the debt. So the debt being $7.5 billion, and you have no time horizon. So, like, do you think the assets are going to grow faster than the debt, and you're buying a call option on that? I mean, that's pretty deep.
Oh, I thought I misunderstood that then. Can you go back to
Yeah.
the quote? To the quote, equal to all the companies' strike price equal to the. Oh, okay. I totally misunderstood that. Let me go back to the mental drawing board here. So
Come back to it.
turn back in.
One other thing that Josh is. Go ahead, Neetu.
Yeah, so I guess it's saying the strike is equal to the debt. So if the assets exceed the strike price, it goes in the money.
It's in the money. So we're in the money. Everybody that holds the equity right now is in the money. You're buying in the money call options.
Okay.
Okay. Indefinite.
I thought by debt he meant outstanding shares. I thought he meant I thought he meant market capitalization or outstanding shares, like the amount of money owed to people owning this call option. I guess I misunderstood.
We're just
that.
gonna have to get Josh on the call just to chat through it.
Yeah.
One other thing that Josh, I mean, he kind of blew my brain in like February. He's like, puts are a call. Buying puts are a call. And that one kind of broke my brain. I had to it finally clicked after I kind of thought about this definition for a while. Is because if you're buying a put, if the price of the stock falls, your strike price is now what you're buying the stock at, or you're buying the stock at less than the strike price, right? You get the opportunity to buy the stock significantly lower, which is a bullish position if you're exercising the stock to go long. So Josh has got this unique way of thinking about things from a different frame of reference.
He did make a post like that. He's like, so you're telling me if I buy a put, I have the right to sell this stock at lower than I could sell it today. Why would anyone do that? And then it's like ... like, a very cryptic message. But when you think about these things with the actual like what they give you, what right they give
you got to think about the right.
Rethink it. Yeah.
Not necessarily the contract. Exactly. Like a lot of people think about the contract itself, but like for me, I rethought that whole concept when I exercised the options last week and the week prior. I started rethinking the right that you buy with the option differently as opposed to the contract itself. So, again, a lot of people ask like, well, where do you learn about options? A lot of the like what I personally have been learning about options is like trading them. I'm not recommending anybody, necessarily go out and like trade short-term options, but like I've learned options from actually doing them, conceptualizing them. And I don't think there's really another great way to learn options because, I mean, Soleil, as we've talked about, like it's hard to understand the like feeling of holding an option, even though like the whole goal is to try to take emotion out of like investing. Like if you take emotion out of investing, which is one way to do it, right? Some people just completely take emotion out and just make it algorithmic and it's a whole thing. But if there's any part of emotion in your investing, you think a little bit differently once you have skin in the game and you understand how like the options work. So yeah, it's
your blood pressure doesn't go up when you're sandbox trading.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, what else? Oh my God. Do you guys want to talk about currency on Mars? What's the Mars currency going to be? There's no way it's going to be dollars.
Milk,
earth milk, water, rocks.
Probably back to the barter system up there for a while.
Yeah. What's the currency on Mars going to be?
How long is it going to take to verify transactions from Mars?
Oh, that's
you have
a good
to wait
question.
for the signal to hit Earth and back.
Speed of light. I mean, Blockstream's got Bitcoin rigs up in satellites, so we've got that going. So
That's good.
I guess it depends. Once you get Starlink connected with mining nodes, or you got nodes on Starlink, then you can bounce it back, and then you're everywhere. How about that?
Yeah, we'll drop Starlinks off on every planet.
We got
And
Starlinks wrapping
moons.
everywhere. Wi-Fi on Mars. Man, the whole
It's really future's bright. It's really
Future's bright.
exciting.
All right, guys. Well,
I'm just going to say Dan didn't fill me with confidence in his, future's bright comment. Right there.
future's
His
bright,
face didn't
guys.
express the emotion that said he's
Future's bright.
pumped about that future.
Future's bright.
I'm excited for those people who are excited
It's like
about it.
Trump coin is going to be the currency on planet Mars, and everybody's going down.
That's base.
All right, I think this is plenty of time. We got an hour 45. I think we call it here, and just have another 7 days of craziness before we jump on next week. So,
Calls on the 2nd.
What is it?
5th. When is the earnings?
Yeah, earnings is the 5th.
It's the
Which
5th?
is a Wednesday, so
5th. Okay.
we'll
Oh,
see.
God,
Someone said
there's
we're not
another
expecting
one.
big things out of this one,
Damn
and I said, well, I wasn't expecting any big things out of the Q3 one, and boy, was I wrong about that. So
Oh,
who
man.
knows? Who knows?
Okay,
I'm not
so
expecting anything crazy.
we're gonna have an
but-
earnings call and then jump right into a True North.
That'd be awesome.
To tie
Yeah,
into
let's
what I
go.
was saying earlier, though, like ATM for all the people that are looking for, hope in their life on the ATM coming down the line here. Part of thinking about that is if your goal really was to try to get the debt to early convert in Q3, Q4, the one thing you would probably do is remove all the inorganic selling pressure from the market for a long period leading up to that. Let that stock do its thing, because that strike price on some of this new debt is, I think, the 130% conversion, somewhere in like the $800 range. Let me see. I've got it on a chart.
It's
here
$800.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, $874 is
Jesus.
the early conversion trigger. So it's got some work to do for that to be a reality. But to get there, right, you use the gas pedal. So you start doing all these converts, get them out the door, and then you let that thing go, right? You don't put anything in the way to hold it back. And if you're really looking at this as a cycle play where you believe that you've got, 9 months to really make this happen, you'd have to be strategic about that. So probably your best case scenario is they burn that ATM all through Q1 and they just don't re-up it. And they say, we're going to wait until we fully finish the plan and we're going to get through all the fixed income side of this before we come back to the well on another ATM. And then that there's not, so that can't be the excuse if it goes down, right? But if they need it to achieve those levels, they need help from Bitcoin and they need to remove all the inorganic selling pressure out of the market. So, there's some hope here for the future, but you got to stay a little long term. 9 months really isn't that long. So, don't worry about this month. Don't worry about the first part of February unless you got short calls, but that's your risk to manage. So, but, keep an eye on how this evolves because it's going to be an interesting year. And if they are aligning with cycles and they want to allow themselves flexibility to be able to operate during a potential bear market, even though they're saying they're putting their own structural bid under Bitcoin, it's something to keep an eye on because you'd have to take certain steps leading into that to make that a potential reality. So there's the glimmer of hope for all the people that are down on the ATM. I'm not down on the ATM yet. I think it was a great tool. I think they've used it really, really well. And I think they're a lot more strategic than most of us are. So I think there's a plan here and you got to let it play out. Buy that call option, buy that equity, call option on the assets, buy that.
NFA, not financial advice. But I think that there's a high likelihood. I don't know. I think there's a likelihood that they don't, I guess, issue another ATM until the $42 billion capital plan is done as well. Right. So I think that's another thing. At least Saylor's kind of alluded to it. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. But I would suspect, you cleared up all the leverage on the balance sheet. Now you go lever it up. And then, okay, now let's start another capital plan. Let's do an $84 billion capital plan. Design it exactly the same. You know exactly how this thing's going to work. Or at least you think and then see where it goes.
Yeah, I think they could run the ATM low. I doubt they'd get through all of it because you're going to want to keep some level of reserve out there that you could tap if you needed to. So unless they need the ATM capital to create the space that they need for the fixed income, I think that you'll see that slow down, and maybe we get down to, 2 billion or 1 billion, and they leave that out there as like an opportunistic reserve. Because if you do get a wild cycle, you're going to want to be able to capitalize on that.
Hit it.
Right. But you don't want to stop the conversion of your convertible debt in that process. So maybe the convertible debt rolls or converts early, you hit the rest of the ATM. Now you're free and clear. Everyone's going to go, well, what do they have if they don't have any convertible debt out there? And it's like, well, they'll probably have 600,000 unencumbered Bitcoin. Like, that's a pretty good start. And then they've just got ultimate operating flexibility to go into a bear market to rebuild really strategically and ramp that leverage back up. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited. I think this is going to be a really cool year for MicroStrategy. And now that we're all watching it constantly and trying to analyze every move, probably way more than we need to, it's going to give us a lot to watch. It's going to be fun.
No shortage of things. And I mean, like, just yesterday, there's another company that announced a Bitcoin treasury strategy, a mining company, a lithium mining company in Europe, which it just sounds so cool, right? You've got a company that's mining semi-hard assets to buy harder assets digitally. Oh yeah, it's just a cool concept. They're going to buy 500 million if they can clear the convertible note. And we're going to see the convertible note ETF is going to explode. Oh my God, that thing is going to totally explode. Like, in a good way, in terms of size and scale and capital that's going to be thrown at this thing. I mean, can you imagine an ETF with diversified sectors, all with Bitcoin exposure? I mean, that's the future. That is the future. You have diversified sectors that are all adopting Bitcoin, and you have it all compiled into one ETF with minimized downside on the debt, but maximum upside on the equity. That thing is going to whoop ass.
I think people are really and sorry not to drag this call on. I can shut up whenever we need to.
Oh, all good.
The one thing that I'm really watching is these new convertible bond ETFs. Like, I got a chance to talk to Matt Cole for a while the other day. And I was asking him, are you guys trying to actually get the bonds themselves directly, or are you going to be creating these synthetically? And the answer was, well, one, they got to see what they can get approved first, right? You got to get through the whole approval process. But the intent is to own the bonds directly. So think of what that means, right? If you get a significant amount of assets into those funds, those assets are dedicated to buying these convertible notes. So you've created this huge demand through one entity, and there's a couple entities now that have these ETFs where the funds are dedicated to buying these convertible bonds. You've just created the demand for them. So now companies are free to create the supply to meet that demand. And because they're restricting these to buying the convertible bonds for companies that are buying Bitcoin with them, right? So there's certain criteria you're going to have to meet to be able to participate in that economy. That's a huge deal, because that means you're basically telegraphing out to the world, hey, we'll buy your bonds. It's the only thing we're allowed to do. And we've got a ton of capital sitting here waiting for your offering. And as long as you buy Bitcoin and that's all you're doing with these funds, we're your buyer, right? I mean, the impact of that is going to be huge, because Saylor first had to go out and prove the market, but now the market's coming and it's trying to pull the supply from all of these other corporations. So it's incentivizing all these companies that want to start doing this accumulation strategy to get moving, because you're about to have several buyers out here that aren't even hedge funds. These are just, ETFs that want to own the actual physical bonds themselves. So that's a really big deal that I think people are overlooking, just how impactful that is to the market. Because I'm also wondering, can they even be concerned about the terms on these bonds? I mean, obviously, if you need more participants than just these ETFs, then, you've got to do some negotiation on the terms of these bonds. But if you've got a dedicated buyer that has to buy convertible bonds, I mean, I'm sure they're going to put limits out there to not get, scalped on these. But as long as it's semi-reasonable and within market ranges in terms of all the terms on these bonds, they're a buyer. The
Yeah.
capital's there.
So-
Make
so
one
that-
call. Get your
That
bonds
puts
out the door.
pressure. That puts pressure on pricing
Huge.
in a good way, right?
Yeah.
Like the 55% conversion premium may go to 70. It's the same thing as like passive index ETFs buying equities. It's the same shit, same concept, just in a different format and different frame. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Once
It's just jet fuel on this whole
Ugh.
strategy, right? Like if you're a company that's flirting with the idea of converting yourself into a leveraged Bitcoin equity, like MicroStrategy or any of these other ones, this is kind of the door that's opening that takes a ton of that backroom legwork out of it for you, right?
Mhm.
If you're looking at, well, I want to do this bond offering, but I don't know if there's a buyer, they're giving you the criteria you have to meet to have a buyer. And as
Yeah,
long
yeah,
as you're
yeah, yeah.
meeting those criteria, that's all you need. And then you've got the other ETFs out there, the treasury ETFs, that are giving you another bogey that says, as long as your company holds 1,000 Bitcoin, we'll put you into these passive flows.
Yeah.
Like you want
Oh my
passive
God.
flows into your equity, get to 1,000 Bitcoin.
And
Like
so
the incentive structures are building up for corporations to have a really easy path to moving towards this strategy. And I think people are just looking past that. Like they just hear ETF product, cool, I can buy it in my brokerage account. They're not thinking about what it means for companies looking at this type of adoption strategy. This is huge. It's really, really big.
attention, all corporations watching this video. There are people on this call that can help you with your Bitcoin treasury strategy. Wow. I mean, it's so true because there are, I mean, everything you just said, right? Like you've got the convertible bond perspective that brings more capital to your equity. You hold 1,000 Bitcoin that brings more capital to the equity. You've got all of these corporations. I mean, there are thousands. How many companies are there in the equity market? Like 4,000, like 3,800 or something like that. Something crazy, right? So people only know 6 of the 4,000. So if you're one of the bottom 3,500, you may consider, okay, how do I get my equity noticed? I figure out how to buy Bitcoin and I put Bitcoin on my balance sheet. I try to buy 1,000. If I could buy 1,000, I could get some capital attraction. Okay, boom, I get some capital attraction. Boom, I start flying up the Russell index list, right? Like, okay, it's just like, it's the spark that a lot of companies really need to start flying up the list of US publicly traded equities and start passing, all of their competitors, because you're tapping these other pools of capital and able to hit convertible debt. You're able to hit the equity markets. I mean, the whole thing, and then just like compounds on itself, right? Like everything compounds on itself.
But now think of even bigger companies, right? Well, if you have to make one simple change, if you're sitting on boatloads of cash and you can make one change and you can go buy 1,000 Bitcoin, and now you also get participation in these passive funds.
Yeah, it's no brainer.
What's it to you, right?
No-brainer.
Why not? So if it's putting out all of these targets for companies to achieve to the point that it's going to make it really simple to create the value proposition to sell getting into a Bitcoin treasury strategy, right? Because they're not saying you need to be 100% of a Bitcoin treasury, but they're giving you very specific criteria to
Here's your targets
to get included in the funds, and you know exactly what they are.
Yeah.
And then you've got all these other funds coming out and they're going, hey, do you like really low cost of capital? Because we would like to buy your convertible bonds from you, right? That's what we do. Here's what you need to meet in order for us to be buyers. I mean, it's creating the easiest marketplace for people to operate in you could possibly hope for with an asset like Bitcoin. So I think it's a much bigger deal than it's getting any attention for. I haven't really heard people talking about it. I watched people kind of gloss over it for a while, like, oh, that's cool. We've got new types of ETF products coming. And I'm going, I don't think you're connecting these dots. Like, just look at what it's messaging out to every company in the US right now.
Yeah.
And if they are really successful, if a lot of capital flows into those ETFs, the incentives just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Right. So anyways, I've been thinking about that for a while. I keep forgetting to bring it up and talk about it, but I think that is such a huge deal for 2025 because a lot of these are still pending approval, right? They're not out there yet, but they might be this quarter. And that starts to really open those floodgates here. So
Oh my
we'll see
God.
what happens, right? Obviously, I'm not promising anything, but if I'm watching this and I'm trying to think of how would this incentivize me if I was a company executive looking to generate value for shareholders, this is a pretty low-hanging fruit way to do it, even if you don't want to go the full leveraged route here, right? It gives you ways to just enter and be a part of it. So, not that 1,000 Bitcoin's a small order. That's a lot of Bitcoin, right? But that'll probably lower over time as 1,000 Bitcoin becomes very difficult to acquire. So whether that ends up being the end state or whether you get other funds that are more like, micro Bitcoin treasury ETF, where if you hold 25 Bitcoin, now you're in that ETF. Those products will come
Oh yeah.
that segment it, where you'll be able to get exposure to different levels of Bitcoin being utilized within companies. So I think it's exciting, but this is what we nerd out on all day long. So,
So you need to have 100 million of Bitcoin, 1,000 Bitcoin.
for the one that's been announced right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
there'll be much lower barriers for other funds, but
Yeah.
that'll be kind of, like the blue chip Bitcoin treasury fund, right?
Oh
If
my
you want to
God,
be a
dude.
respected Bitcoin treasury company, you're going to have 1,000 of these things.
Once insurance companies figure this out, I mean, this is like a game over. I mean, the asset duration liability matching. And if you're able to create an ETF or even like a bond, like a pseudo combined bond of all of these bonds, if you're able to take all the bonds and combine them into a single bond with a duration, you can match your liabilities to it, and they all have like 4-year or greater like durations. Thinking about Bitcoin, I mean, the world is going to change so freaking fast. Oh my God, holy
See, that's too
cow.
big brain for me. So I'm going to leave that in your
Holy
capable
cow.
hands. You can go straighten out the insurance industry. That one's that's well
Jesus.
beyond my pay grade.
These oh my God, the insurance industry has no idea. Like they have no idea. Oh my God. All right.
So in summary, I hope Soleil beats the brakes.
Are
off
you
of
bullish
Misty's
enough?
returns.
All caps. Are you bullish enough? You're not
Please-
bullish
no.
enough.
I saw you posting that under, and I said I'd never name names, and I'll never blame anyone directly. But
Well, Bitcoin has fallen since I posted that. So fuck me.
see, well,
Yeah.
I won't lay blame anywhere. I'll just say I saw signs that this could happen.
Damn it. All right. Well, we're at 2 hours. We should probably pull the plug. Any final
Awesome,
thoughts,
guys.
Dan, Soleil? I mean, Ben, you hit us with some final thoughts that already kind of
I can't
Sorry.
follow that.
crushed that.
I can't shut up. It's one problem I have. So
No, that was another good insight.
Awesome. Well, exciting times to be thinking
All
about
right.
MicroStrategy and Bitcoin. Very, very bullish about the future. Next week, we'll have even more information. I'm sure there'll be 400 executive orders signed between the next 7 days. And, MicroStrategy is going to continue to be volatile and one of the top publicly traded equities, and we'll follow along. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Appreciate the time. We will see you next week. Signing off.
See you.